Right, my name's Leon Edwards and I work at the Wales Cooperative Centre. I'm the project manager for the Centre's Business Succession and Consortia project. And I'm going to kind of lead on the delivery today, but I'm very pleased to have with me today one of my clients actually, Ian Isaacs, who's Chief Executive of a development trust in the West area for New Sandfields and Aberavon. And Ian has been involved with a consortia that we've supported him with called SEWales2011. So I mean, I'm going to kind of give some kind of very basic content around consortia, but obviously Ian's the practitioner here today that you can grill really in terms of his experiences of setting up a consortia and actually running a consortia for the end benefit of the members involved. So what we're looking to do today is just an introduction to consortia, looking at some basic principles, some of the benefits of consortia working, conditions necessary for effective consortia working, and some of the challenges as well, because I can stand up in front of you today and so can Ian around what are the benefits of consortia working and how wonderful, you know, the opportunities are. But if we don't actually talk about the challenges with the model and some of the actual issues that you need to overcome to get consortia working effectively, then we wouldn't be doing our jobs really. So you have to have kind of both sides of the story. As I said, I work for a specific project, the Business Succession and Consortia project, and what we're wanting to do on the consortia side of things is get organisations, be them sole traders, micro businesses, SMEs, and social enterprises, which obviously the majority of you are here today, getting you to work together on a collaborative basis. Now, whether that's very informal consortia or whether that's very formal consortia, and there can be a continuum. You know, there's no set model for what consortia working is. Basically, it's whatever you need really to fit your needs and aspirations as individual businesses. And we will then work very closely with you in terms of that development process. Just to kick off, I want to try and make this session as interactive as possible, so you can't all kind of hide and kind of, you know, remain silent for the rest of the session. When you say the word cooperative consortia, what does that mean to you? You know, if you want to kind of shout out some kind of keywords when you hear the issue around consortia working. Collaboration, yeah. Partnership, yeah. Economies of scale, yeah. Yep. Shared resources, yeah. Delivering together, yeah. Skill sharing, yeah. Yeah. Well, that's effectively what it's about. It's actually about looking at collective capacity, really, from a group of organisations who are looking to do something on a collective basis. So how we would usually class consortia are organisations which are basically run in a shared and equal way by and for the benefit of its members. And I mean, I'm really excited about working on the project that I currently work with, because it's all about cooperatives, and I love cooperatives. I think they're a fantastic business vehicle, and this is all about vehicles that are for the benefit of its members, as we said, be them sole traders, SMEs, social enterprises. It doesn't matter. It's all for the benefit of the organisations who are involved. And it's all about, as I said, collective capacity. It's about how you can actually work together to achieve something that perhaps you've been struggling to do as an independent organisation. Now, that's not necessarily just because you've been a very small organisation. It might be because you're perhaps a lonely organisation. You know, you're kind of struggling in terms of your peer support or your networks. It might be that you haven't necessarily got access to market or the kind of the contacts in a certain market, you know, enable for you to actually start working in that market. So it's not all about size, and that's one of the misapprehensions about consortia working as well. It's that it's a vehicle that just helps small organisations. That's not true. It can help any size of organisation do something that perhaps it hasn't been able to do as an individual organisation. And consortia can be present in any sectors, really. I mean, it's quite interesting. We put the social enterprise sector there as a kind of a solitary sector in its own right. But actually, when you look at the sectors, social enterprises and yourselves as organisations are actually involved in a whole range of those sectors: domiciliary care, transport, sport and leisure, childcare. You know, you are delivering these services across a range of sectors, and therefore, you know, I truly believe that actually the only limits to how you can use the consortia model is by the imaginations and the ideas of the organisations and the people involved in those organisations in taking a consortia idea forward. I want to give you an opportunity as well. I mean, you know, conferences are all about networking as well, and for you obviously to get an opportunity to meet new people, find out what other organisations are doing. So we just thought we'd spend kind of 5 minutes, just kind of very informally, rip the room apart. It doesn't matter that everybody else is coming in afterwards. Just kind of, you know, having a very informal discussion with the kind of people around you about the top 3 things about perhaps why your organisation is looking at collaboration. Why have you come to the workshop today? You know, why do you think this is a beneficial thing for the social enterprise sector in Wales to be thinking about? So just 5 minutes on that, and then we'll have some ideas, and then I'll bring Ian in then to kind of start to talk about why his organisation got involved in this Consortia initiative called GCell. So 5 minutes just to kind of, there's no kind of set formula to this, split yourselves up and just think about 2 or 3 things that you can feed back to us in a few minutes.
That's Jim, Mike.
I know Kenny, I'm Jeff, and we'll oh, right, okay. So you're class yourself as social entrepreneur?
I'm Dave Ware, Blind and Great Council.
Okay.
The reason I'm here, just a bit of background would help. Monwell Science and Services is currently set within the potential business supported employment business within the council currently. Sat within the regeneration department, but it's looking to externalise hopefully within the next 6 months to 12 months and to run a social enterprise. I mean, this just caught my eye as something which we should be considering. So we're not actually engaged in actually running a business even as yet. What we are trying to sort of set that in place with the help of Social Firms Wales. But so I'm just looking for I wasn't expecting the question of why we might want to collaborate in the science and services business. So my interest probably is to say, well, we need to get ourselves up and running and making a profit ourselves first of all. But and in terms of what they do currently, I know they're part of a British Sign Makers Association or something like that. So to me, that's like more of a body, isn't it, rather than informal collaboration, which I think she's talking about there. So I don't know if any of you guys have actually.
Well, I work for Newport City Council, and I met you at your Regain conference not so long ago. Yeah. I run a regeneration project in Newport. We're just starting it, and we're looking to encourage social enterprises to set up. We have a location where they can go into that we're going to be rebuilding, and we're looking for suitable social enterprise to generating economic benefit to the area, really. So my reason to be here is to meet people, obviously, to meet social enterprises, because it's very hard to actually get out and meet social enterprises when they don't come to you in the council. Very much, they sort of stand back. So it's a way of meeting social enterprises from the local area as well, and from South Wales.
Well, we're in the community development game, local Gwydir, so we're about providing social benefits, but we have to have a social enterprise, to fund part, if not in the future, all of the programme of activities we do. So we're forced into that route whether we like it or not. We have forestry experience. We run a piece of woodland at the Gwydir Forest. We do a social theatre up there. But the enterprise we're establishing is managing the woodlands in Conway, which a lot of them are unmanaged. So they're not providing any useful resource to people or the environment, in fact. And we're going to buy product, produce logs and sell logs. A lot of log fires. People are buying into that now in a big way. So we have to work in collaboration. We don't own all the woodlands in Conway. We're not a trainer. We need chainsaws, NTCP certificates, all of that stuff. So we have to find a way of working with other providers with different models in order to get what we need to do done to get our enterprise up and running.
I suppose it's, in a way, you've got to find out what you can give them and they can give you. It's got to be a two-way, isn't it? Yeah, it's got to be two-way.
I mean, a lot of people are sat on woodlands because they were. It was a trendy thing to do, wasn't it? Buy woodlands, have some trees, and then what do you do? 5 years later, the thing's overgrown and in a very unhealthy state. We can go in and sort that out, and then pitch in to the woodfield market and help the environment at the same time. There's a lot of people interested in working for us to do that. But we need to engage people like farmers who only ever want to see money back. That piece of wood, you're going to pay for it.
When the question came out, I thought, and that's why I've come here. Why I've not thought about it at all in any deep sense, but something I have been struck with is that there's obviously enormous amount of skills here today, right? And I wonder, I asked the question, the last thing, is there a list? Like if I want to buy something, training, whatever, yeah, is there a list I can go to, and I get social enterprises coming up? I don't want to go to private traders. I'd rather go to an organisation that has some values, that shares the same values as I do. Now, for me, I would only collaborate with people that would share the same values I do.
I'm new to the sector, but I'm just thinking, the Welsh Social Enterprise Coalition, is that one of their functions, their remits? I'm not sure. You'd hope it would be, to gather a membership directory, if you like.
That's it.
That's what you want, isn't it? And that, I'm sure, that can be done, well, be online these days as well, so I'm interested.
Someone comes to me and says, we want to start diving courses. Deep sea diving is a good occupation to go into. Where do I go? Is there a social enterprise somewhere in Wales that's offering courses that I would rather give any money I earn or raise to?
So what's your
like
business?
an economy. It's actually closer to Rhodes. We're a community development project.
Right.
But what we tend to do is that we sell training.
Right.
We do training. We do research. We do. We've had a degree of success recently with. I can't remember what the name is in English, but it's feasibility studies with community groups. Like they want to set up something, we'll go in. We've got contacts with someone who can do a business plan. We've got contacts with a structural engineer. They were in a building.
How much is it going to cost, and how are we going to do it?
Yeah, and how much money do they need to raise? And then we would even try and support them, if we could, where to go and get the money.
I mean, one way of doing it is generally, I mean, I don't know how, with procuring services, I mean, I don't know if you use like Sell to Wales is the national website, isn't it? Well, I mean, when you put your description of what you want in your services, you can say on there, presumably, in terms of how you're going to assess that, or in your brief, the criteria will be.
Big impersonal thing,
Yeah,
Sell to Wales.
It is, but if you've got a lot of people looking at it, which you have, because it's 35,000 businesses, it's part of that brief, and one of your criteria is to say it was not just best value for money, or economic value for money, but that you really got to, in your tender, really explain to us how you, are you a social enterprise? I'm not sure whether you could limit it to that. That might not be a good idea.
No,
but you could explain what your social commitments are as a business.
There are people here today who are thinking, "Oh, social enterprise sounds interesting."
So that's something you could do.
Yeah.
But you're right, a directory is what you want, and I'm not sure.
I really don't think it does exist. I really don't think it exists as it stands at the moment. I think it's very hard to map how many social enterprises there are in Wales. I don't think it's there. I know that Liam Black was talking about it on a UK basis.
Welsh water is classified as a social
absolutely.
I would know.
Does anybody want to kick off? Does anybody want to kind of just shout out some of the key things that your groups come up with? And first of all, I will issue an apology. I like to work with a flip chart and like to scribble loads of things down and make links between what groups are saying. So we'll have to imagine I've got a flip chart here this afternoon because we obviously haven't got one. So who wants to kick off? What, in terms of your organisations, why have you come to this workshop today? What do you think the benefits are of collaborative working? Come on, silence is not a good start for an interactive discussion session.
We sort of talked about, obviously I'm an intermediary rather than a social entrepreneur myself, but we talked about how in terms of the current economic circumstances, maybe it was making individuals and organisations look at collaboration almost through as a necessity, but it was almost all their processes were being revised in a way that perhaps people weren't, prior to the economic circumstances that we've had in the last 3 or 4 years, really. So we focused on that.
Yeah, and I think actually that's really interesting. In terms of the clients, I think that I'm dealing with now on our project, it's probably half and half. We've got a range of clients where they're proactively thinking, okay, well, we recognise there's a change in the external environmental factors. We're proactively positioning ourselves to get ready for those, and then we'll use the Consortia model to do it. On the other hand, we're attending events left, right and centre, usually kind of local government events around, right, we're changing the landscape for this particular programme, we need organisations to be collaborating, form consortia to be able to do this, and all of a sudden there's a panic drive around consortia working. So yeah, the external kind of environment and the kind of economic climate is certainly driving the need for organisations to be thinking about this, definitely.
one other point, sorry, but maybe you'll address this in the challenges that you're going to talk about, is that, you know, from someone who's a funder and an intermediary, often you get approached by social enterprises and third sector organisations, and because they're being driven by a kind of, you know, social mission or the community benefit that they see from something, that they're trying to establish something that's already being well established by another organisation, but they won't actually think about working differently because they're very fixated on doing something because they feel it's meeting a need that they've identified. So, you know, talked about how you kind of address that issue really, but maybe that's something you'll come and talk about in the challenges.
Yeah, and I mean, I suppose it's how you can use the consortium model as an opportunity to address the whole issue of duplication. You know, if you know an organisation down the road is doing something very similar, you know, have the conversation and say, okay, well, we're doing something very similar, but what is our particular area of expertise? What is your particular area of expertise? And is there a way that actually we can strengthen the offer that we're taking to market by working together, as opposed to being fearful of each other because we know we both deliver childcare? You know, so I think, you know, it's about seeing that potentially as an opportunity as well.
You need two people then willing to have that discussion, don't you? So that's quite difficult.
Yeah.
It could be quite difficult if one isn't prepared to engage in a strictly, you know, very competitive market. Perhaps I could come on to one thing we did discuss.
Yeah.
Is it okay just to speak into it? On a wider issue, not perhaps collaboration between individual companies, but about the social enterprise sector and having some sort of directory. Does such a thing exist whereby people who wish to engage with social enterprises because of their social values makes it easier for people who are looking for that service, if you like? Does such a thing exist as a social enterprise directory in Wales? Or?
Well, I know that it was something that the Social Enterprise Coalition were considering at one point in time, and I know, and it's something that has been raised actually. As a Wales Cooperative Centre, we run a number of network events, and I know that it's something that's been raised in that as well, because obviously social enterprises want to do business with other social enterprises, and and that's an opportunity that we see, particularly with consortia around this framework for intertrading as well, which probably doesn't happen as much as it should do. I mean, I wonder if it's a good time. I'm just thinking, obviously, we've got our practitioner here, Ian. Ian, do you want to give a bit of a kind of an insight into why, your organisation decided to get involved with a consortia activity? I think that would be a good start, really.
I think first of all I should defend the family honour and say my name is Ian Isaacs. So don't perpetuate the mistake by putting me down as Ian Isaacs. Just squaring my identity there. The very point you bring up, actually, I filled in an online registration to a site called Community Enterprise Directory this morning, because when I looked through the site, the Welsh Social Enterprise Coalition is also on it. So, and a number of others are, but I obviously see that it's a new site, and there's some very basic information on it. So it's a kind of a directory type site. If you give me your email, I'll pass it on to you. My contribution today really is to explain the reasons why we, as a community development trust, that is New South Wales Aberavon, which mainly works in the areas of the two Sandfields wards and Aberavon, but our area of operation, if you like, is South Wales, the valleys, and even the world. But our area of benefit is the people who live south of the M4 and the railway line in Port Talbot, really. But if we were to think, companies thinking about consortia working, why work together through consortia? Well, I mean, I think it's important first to ask the question, can we do it ourselves anyway? Because you've got closer control over your resources, you've got closer control over your staff, and you can plan the work far more effectively, at least in the short term, than what a consortia could. But it's best that you ask the question, would funders prefer a collaborative approach? more and more funders are seeking a partnership approach to delivery. For example, you could have different organisations performing different roles in the delivery of a project. That is, you could have one organisation with the technical expertise, another organisation, particularly development trusts, would be more experienced in community engagement, for example, with all the different groups and residents who live in their area. The employing of staff, one of the organisations could employ the staff, and another of the organisations could do the evaluation and monitoring. So they're all terms that you'll be familiar with. But why go that extra leap and consider having a consortium? GCEL came about because of the work mainly of Philip White and David Edge, who are technical experts in the field of energy. I mean, Phil himself is an energy consultant and a mining consultant. And it's coincidental that we've been lifelong friends as well as colleagues. And Phil will be the first to tell you that we don't live in each other's pocket, that we have more than one difference of opinion sometimes in how to go forward, but we seem to get a synergy from that. But what they had was a concept of a PV for free scheme, that householders in disadvantaged areas, that the actual government's feed-in tariff scheme was meant to tackle fuel poverty. And so here was an opportunity to create a scheme in areas of social disadvantage. In April 2009, the government-backed feed-in tariff scheme was launched at a rate of about 41 pence per kilowatt hour. That is the amount of energy that you generate back to the grid, and you get paid for it. And in April of last year, that increased to 43.3 pence. There was a rush by investors, those who were quickest off the mark, who saw that there was rates of return on typical solar farm type schemes as high as 12 and 15%. And you had a proliferation of solar farms, particularly in Cornwall and Devon and those places, where I understand that there's about 50 farms, where investors were investing as much as 20 and 30 million pounds in schemes and getting a rate of return from that in the region of 3, 4 and 5 million pounds a year. So it was quite generous, and then the government intervened again and capped those solar farms at 5,000 kilowatt schemes. That would be, not to baffle you with figures, that would be, they would allow a solar panel array that would be about as big as two tennis courts, for example, instead of these huge solar panel farms that prolificated in the West Country. But GRW, which was the community interest company formed by Phil White, myself, and David Edge, got together with other development trusts like NSA, Creation from the Garrow Valley and Bridgend, ACE, which is the Action in Cairo, Ely and Cardiff, SUST, which is a trading arm of, I think the Sustainable Development Wales, Margaret Minhinnick, for those who would know her, and obviously the DTA Wales as well. On Rhian's recommendation, we had a person who was not attached to a trading organisation to be a director of that company. But we got together to realise the possibilities of what is called a rent-a-roof scheme, or rent-a-roof, lease-a-roof scheme in the communities of South Wales. That is that the owner-occupiers could benefit from free daytime electricity, but the cost of putting the panels on the roof and the cost of maintaining them over 25 years would be paid for by the consortium. And the individual in the lease would assign the feed-in tariff rates to the consortium so that all those costs could be covered. And our concern was that there would be a sum of money in the financial profile model that allowed for about £80 per property per year for 25 years to go back to the communities where the solar panel arrays were. And so, for example, if we managed to get 500 in Sanfus Aberavon, we'd have 500 times £80 per year coming back to us in the form of community benefit. We also put into the governing model that each of the organisations was responsible to ensure that the community benefited from those receipts in the tariff. We had a number of problems in actually converting. I'm moving on a bit too far, but I'm going to the second part. Right, I was going to say there are many benefits to consortium working, and I can only give samples here, but there are also many challenges, and I'll be dealing with them in the second part. But the considerations were that for each organisation to have attempted this kind of scale of organisation on their own would have meant that they lacked the scale, really, and they lacked the numbers required to attract private investors. We were talking of numbers, 1,500 roof scheme would cost in the region of £10 million to buy the equipment and put the panels on the roofs. We ain't got that kind of money. Our bank manager would barely blink an eye if we asked him for it. He said, no, you can't. So it really was opportunities for private equity investor organisations to come into the field. So on our own, we couldn't have got that kind of scale of, at that time we were thinking of 1,500 homes. Investors we saw really weren't interested unless you had 1,000 properties, really. But anyway, meetings were held and it was decided to form a consortium called Green Community Energy Limited. And as everybody shortens everything nowadays to give it a bit of a jingle, we call it GCEL. The key messages really are it is not for profit, so we maintain our influence in terms of social purpose. And it is about providing sustainable community benefit, that's the £80 I was referring to, for 25 years. These aspirations were then converted into a governing document, and the company formation took place with the help and assistance of the Wales Co-op, and Brian certainly played her part there, helping to convert our aspirations into the memorandum articles of association. And I think we've done a good job of that, actually. Everybody knew why they were coming together in the consortium was for this social purpose and not for, the pound signs or the potential of earning about 40 grand a year from the feed-in tariff in the form of community benefit. Well, Ryan guided us through that process, and I kind of guided them through the legal side of things, including the drafting of the leases to be offered to the project in the interests of the customer and the property owner for the 25 years of the scheme. So there we were, we'd all come together, we were now going to try to convert those aspirations into reality. And you'll hear about that in part 2.
There should be a commercial ad break now, shouldn't there, or something like that, but it's just going to be me. I think Ian touched on then quite a number of the advantages with consortia working, and in terms of what your feedback was as well. I mean, some of the kind of other areas that we really do think the consortia can benefit you on is certainly things around bulk purchasing, increasing brand recognition as well. And I'm going to show you a case study actually about how you can use the consortia model to get really better, kind of much stronger market presence than perhaps you as individual organisations that you've currently got. Certainly things around peer support and the ability to tender for larger contracts. That's certainly something that's becoming more and more relevant with the consortia model, is that contracts are too big for organisations, and that how can you help us be able to get better access, particularly to public sector procurement opportunities. So certainly the consortia model is very, very relevant in that particular issue. An interesting case study, and actually Vince is here today, is a consortia that we've been working with called Secure Wales. I mean, it's a really interesting one from our perspective because it's actually a consortia of 5 SMEs and a social enterprise. So thank goodness we've actually got a model where social enterprises are working with private sector, which is fantastic from our point of view. And the reason that they formed this business was because they recognised as independent organisations, they all had a particular security product that they could take to market. But they realised actually if they created a consortia where they could market a very holistic product with all of the aspects of the security market that they currently provided, it would get them much better access to opportunities. And it was really interesting, Vince was saying this morning in this morning's workshop that they tendered for a piece of work as Cynon Valley Crime Prevention Association. They are a social enterprise. 6 months later, the work went out again, and they actually tendered for it as Secure Wales, and they won the work. They didn't win the work in the first place because it was in the Vale of Glamorgan, and the feedback they got was, well, you know, you're an organisation, you're obviously heavily kind of based in Cynon Valley, you know, we're not quite sure our kind of residents in the Vale of Glamorgan would be keen to work with you. Using the brand of Secure Wales, it's got them that better access to that market opportunity. So that's a really, really good example of how consortia working can really kind of give organisations better access to markets and give you an opportunity to work with other types of organisations that you might not necessarily feel you've got the kind of confidence or got the networks to do so. We're going to move on, I suppose, quite neatly into the kind of second half, really. And again, you know, that's why I'm so delighted that Ian's here, actually, to kind of talk to you about the challenges of this. And one of the key messages that I would like you to go away with today is, yes, consortia working does present you with a really fantastic opportunity to support the long-term sustainability of your organisations, but you have to see them as businesses. You have to see the idea of developing a consortia just the same as if you were starting a new business. It comes with exactly the same challenges of resourcing, making it work. How do you make sure you're developing a product that is something that all of its members want, just the same as how would you make sure you're developing a business with a product that customers want. So you have to consider that when you're actually thinking about consortia development. So touching on the challenges, actually, and some of the kind of potentially the perceived negatives of consortia working is really, really important. So again, perhaps can you spend kind of 5 minutes, perhaps, you know, mixing up the groups and just, again, having some informal chats about perhaps what you wouldn't see as the perceived negatives of forming consortia. It might be that as an organisation this has been on the back of your mind for some time, and you know there's just been something there niggling that does stop you from making that jump really into forming these partnerships. And then perhaps thinking about perhaps some of the conditions necessary for effective consortia working. If you've got a group of people around the table, you know, what needs to be there. So I mean, for example, trust. Trust is always a critical one that comes up. You know, how can you work with people in a consortia model if you don't trust them? So, you know, just 5 minutes just thinking about some of those kind of conditions, and then we'll have another discussion and again, then bring Ian's useful insight in as well. Brilliant. Thank you.
Yes.
I think it's trust-based, and I think the key is communication. You know, you have to have some real valid, open lines of communication between people involved.
I think what stops organisations is that you only feel you're going to be able to go as quickly as the slowest in the group. So, you know, if you think about the organisations that you've got, sort of, you know, Ian's talked about sort of 5 or 6 different organisations that, you know, how does that work when everyone's got a different kind of culture and different way of doing things and different policies and procedures?
Someone's
quite
got
difficult.
the idea. Someone's going to take that one. I don't know how that worked. There's 4 businesses, obviously separate businesses, came together. Who instigated it?
Yeah.
Who said? Who thought? Well, someone's got to have the spark, I suppose, to kick it off. That's not like it.
I think someone's going to have the spark, and someone's going to have the drive and the realisation of where the skill bases actually blend.
See the value, sell it to the other companies.
Yeah, and then obviously, you know, pilot it for a period of time to see if it can actually work from each parties.
If someone came in to you as a social enterprise, a small business, said, I got a great idea, you don't know me from Adam, but benefits. What you're trying to do, you take over.
Well, I go the other way. I'm a social enterprise that's going out to people and saying, I think we could work together and these would be the benefits.
That might
so
be a
I'm
reaction.
actually doing that at the moment. So I think it's if you feel that, I think it's all about the spark is the light bulb. You have to be able to see it, sell it to them, and you have to be able to show them the benefits of what they could get from working with you. And that's how I've sort of worked. And so far at the moment, the partnerships that I've got are in infancy, but they are working quite well. Play on the Move, we're a mobile play services business. So it's working for me. But I want that to grow. Because, and the main reason I'm using them is financial. It's purely financial. It's because there are things that I want to do that I can't achieve because I haven't got the money. I haven't got the pocket deep enough. I have a very small pocket and big ideas. And so that's why I'm trying to build these partnerships.
But the finance is always going to be the thing that drives it, isn't it, really? Because, with what Ian's trying to achieve, as he said, that for one organisation, the kind of scale that they're talking about, it's just not achievable. So the only way you can do it and that's why it works in a way.
And with everybody's perceived vision at the moment is that everything is contracting of ways that they can get additional funding. So it's just looking at things
obviously
differently.
That example, they obviously employ a person as well to coordinate it all. So there's an additional cost in inverted commas, which you invest to save down the road. So costs.
But you do have to have that coordination, because otherwise everyone goes off in different directions, don't they? Invariably happens.
And for me, another key driver is the exposure of brand, which again, being able to partner with much bigger organisations or brands that are already quite heavily recognised, that would enable me to tag on to start elevating the brand awareness in line with where theirs is. So that's another key reason why I'm doing it. And sometimes on perception it does actually cost me, because the effort and the resource that I am ploughing in could quite be that much heavier than my partner. But my end goal is to achieve the elevation that I want, so therefore I offset that.
So Play on the Move.
Play on the Move.
Explain that.
Play on the Move is a mobile play service. So the core of the business being a converted double-decker bus.
Right.
So it's taking indoor play applications, so a play centre, which is traditionally these large metal frames and all the rest of it, and play buses, which are not a new concept. They've been used in one way or another since 1969, and blending the two. So we have a play centre on wheels. Basically, that whole metal structure is fitted into a double-decker bus.
Double deckers, I remember watching that on Summer Holiday.
Everything in there was movable. This is one solid frame with an extra bit of space that we can create on the outside. So we've got massive amount of applications with regards to play benefits, social benefits, fitness benefits, childcare possibilities, partnerships, collaboration, training. The bus is mobile, so we will go anywhere.
So I did on Tuesday, just wondered when saying something like Kerry Bird and I.
The key issue that I've got is getting people to consider using this, and that's why the partnerships have become important for me, because then I can get people to be aware of it, look at using it, think, oh, that's a bit of an unusual application, what could I possibly do with it? So that's where I'm coming from.
I mean, I don't work in childcare, but Blind Vet has problems with transport anyway.
Well,
so
all those small areas that haven't got it, we can get in.
Good to go, there's a microphone.
I didn't realise that was on.
I'll speak to Karen.
Okay, can I ask people to, we'll come back, because I'm just mindful the last session in here starts at 4 o'clock, so we're going to have probably random people start walking in probably around kind of at 5 to 4. Who wants to kick off in terms of some of the, the challenges, what you would perceive as kind of negative aspects really in relation to Consortia? Who wants to start. And I don't mean this session to be very kind of negative and very downbeat, but it has to be real. This has to be a realistic discussion to make these issues come to life, really. So who wants to kick off? Yeah?
Well, we were just talking about shared values there, that for most social enterprises, it's the social benefit is the key, and it's what we're all in the game for, and the profit-generating enterprise bit is more of a necessity, really, to sustain the social bits. So in partnership working, in collaborations, it's quite important to find people who can share the values. And often in the commercial world, where your partners may be, they don't. And they may even be shared distributing companies, and you're profit back into social benefit company. So it's making the match, really, finding the right partners for collaboration.
That's really true, and it's not just finding the right partner in terms of similar kind of values and perhaps ethical base, which obviously as social enterprises that is at your core, really, as operating as an organisation. But it's also around one of the issues that we tend to find is trying to stave away from this competitive environment. Why would you set up a consortia when all the members are then competing against each other within that model? So finding the right partners is really, really, really critical, actually. Anything else? What else did some of the other groups come up? You've got a gentleman there pointing very avidly at you in the purple there, so I guess you've got a point. Do you want me to...
Yeah, I was just saying to the group that it's very appropriate, this, for us here today, because I'm representing a group that wanted to set up as a recycling social enterprise. Then we found that we were talking to people who wanted to set up as sole traders. And we thought we were totally off the wall here, a social enterprise. We want sole traders working with us. So it's brilliant for us to see that there is a model out there that we could work with. The issues that have come up and the things we're discussing at the moment are around control, making sure that we've got a structure in place so that there isn't any conflict arising over finance in particular. So it's kind of setting up that umbrella consortia that can fulfill the needs of all the organisations and provide the kind of support that perhaps would be more difficult for a sole trader to find, sharing resources and, basically working out how we're going to do that effectively. Yeah.
And that's where the planning comes in. That's why the planning to these things is so critical. And it worries us sometimes where, particularly when you have a procurement opportunity that comes up very, very quickly and all of a sudden it says, right, you have to form consortia around that. To us that's very dangerous if all of a sudden organisations are forced very quickly to find consortia partners and you don't necessarily have that time to do that effective planning and have that planning process. Because, this is where you iron out all these things. Okay, well, who's going to do this? Who's going to be responsible for this output? Who's going to be responsible for this contribution? And I know Ian's got some... Do you want to kind of share some of your thoughts, Ian, on this? Because I know that you've experienced some challenges with the kind of the consortia working model, really.
Well, as I say, I can only give some samples, really, and that's why I've made some notes about it. But to me, it is about converting aspirations into reality. The top tips would be to face the fact of bringing 7 or 8 experienced individuals together who are leaders in their own respective fields may result in a combination of pooling and a synergy of that experience, but it can also be a recipe for sparks to fly, because they each not only going to defend their own patch, but they're going to exercise their own prowess as leaders in their field. I think you need to take time and allow time to form the entity. Everybody needs to feel part of that process and have a sense of ownership, and fits neatly into that. You really can't rush these things. Where you have a mixture of large, small, strong and not so strong organisations coming together around the same table, that can lead to difficulties because of lack of equal contribution in terms of community engagement, for example, in our case, where we needed to engage with the community to get the expressions of interest. The larger organisations were getting the numbers up very, very quickly. The smaller ones were struggling, even though they had the benefit of some coordinated training and that GSEL was able to offer. Targets need to be realistic and always allow time for obstacles and blindside events that will hamper progress. Each organisation needs to commit themselves to realistic goals and put that to work. In GSEL's case, it was a race against time that began on the 1st of July after a period of community engagement to get expressions of interest from the property owners interested in our scheme. I've got some examples of expressions of interest forms, application forms for you to take with you so you can see what they were. I mean, by the end of October, GSEL itself across South Wales had 4,000 expressions of interest. And people began to sense, wow, you know, this is working. Multiply that by 80, and what do you per year for 25 years, and look what you've got. But the problem was converting those expressions of interest into signed leases. We didn't really envisage that the lease would be a problem, but it took ages to get right. We involved 2 sets of solicitors so that we didn't just rely on one legal opinion, but we had a second legal opinion to check it all. We then come across, once you've got your expressions of interest, you then presented the lease to them, and you then come up against customer resistance, people changing their minds. They see a document that you want to sign on it and get your next door neighbour to be a witness. Oh, I don't want to bother. You know, we didn't realise it would be all about that. Family members would be disagreeing, even grandsons and granddaughters telling granddad and grandma, oh, you don't want to be bothering with things like that. So all sorts of excuses then of converting these expressions of interest into leases, even though they were going to benefit from free daytime electricity and a well-maintained solar panel array for the next 25 years. There was also resistance in the industry. There was resistance to process and approvals from the electricity supply industry. Western Power being the main distributor of electricity in the South Wales area anyway. They call them the District Networking Office, the DNO. I'm fed up of hearing the term DNO. But that had been solved by about mid-October, but it had taken about 4 or 5 months to get a rapport, a relationship between GSEL and the DNO to get the right numbers of approvals. The main obstacle being you got 10 people in the same street all want to sign up to the PV scheme, and the DNO would tell you, oh, well, the substation at the bottom of the road won't take all that electricity coming back in, but it'll let you have 3 or it'll let you have 4. So they kind of hold the whip hand, and anyway, you're causing them to do work that's outside of their core business, aren't you? You know, and yet they've been told you've got to get set up to facilitate this, this demand for solar panel developments. Well, by the end of October, we'd had 250 homes approved by the DNO. What was a 2,000 house scheme that we were all excitedly talking about last May when you kindly got us to the point of signing the company agreement, it was then reduced to 1,500 in July. And it was reduced further to 750 in October. We'd had a number of investors who, for one reason or another, entered into purposeful discussions with us and then pulled out. When they saw that the price of panels were coming down, their rate of return was being affected, and now the government's announcement that it's going to reduce the 43p down to 21 pence, I'm out, was the classic phrase of the investors. On hindsight, should the consortium members have provided the resources to allow GSEL, the consortium, to form its own business entity by recruiting a manager, company manager, an administrator and a finance officer? I mean, the consortium was operating as a virtual company through its board of directors. Each each director was pursuing their own community or business aspiration through the board, whilst obviously observing the need to get the numbers of properties on the table. I mean, I feel the answer to whether or not we should have formed it as a business entity with its own office and its own secretariat to begin with, I feel the answer is yes. Every one of the consortium members were assuming roles that would have been performed or coordinated by GCell itself. Progress towards the target figures, I believe, would have been better coordinated, and weaknesses in terms of community engagement and selling techniques would have been addressed. At the end of the day, even though we were helping, say, former Future Jobs Fund placement staff, young people who'd been unemployed for a long time, older people who had been unemployed, we weren't able to convert them into salesmen. It takes a particular type to knock on the door, sit down with with a householder, have a cup of tea and allay their fears and sell the lease to them first time off. Hence, I've got another leaflet for you, which I cunningly devised, which the banner heading on this leaflet is, "Congratulations, your home has been selected for our PV for free scheme." And so it makes them feel good to begin with. Don't worry about this form, we'll get to that later, you know. So obviously there are selling techniques that we have to learn. Even selling a community benefit message, even selling a message that is going to benefit the householder with free daytime electricity that will save them about £250, £300 a year. So you can't give the stuff away, can you? I think what put the tin hat on it, what put the sprag in the wheel, was when the government announced that it was opening up a consultation on the feed-in tariff and reducing the feed-in tariff fee from 43 to 21 pence. All of a sudden, these investors were saying, "I'm out," because their expectations in terms of rates of return, or as they call it internal rate of return, because they don't use bank language, they would have to bring them down from 10 and 12% down to about 5%. But our calculations are that we remain optimistic. There's been a tremendous backlash from both the industry and from voluntary organisations, the third sector, and energy consultants in the field. A huge backlash against the Ministry for Climate Change, or against climate change, are they? One of the two. But anyway, in conclusion, I think consortia working can be a positive process for social enterprises. It allows several organisations to benefit from shared expertise and shared workloads. Consortium working is an attractive mechanism for working on projects that are outside the norm for one organisation, for example. But importantly, it needs time. It's like, I used to use a phrase, it's like crossing the road with a pram. It takes time.
And actually, I mean, Ian's helpfully given us some really interesting insights into some of the challenges and some of the conditions necessary for consortia working. I mean, that's why we always get worried when you hear, when we have clients who say, oh, right, we found our partners, we're coming to you because we need you to set us up as a consortia, but we need it done in the next kind of, 2-3 weeks because we're then going to bid for this. And you think, oh, okay, well, have you sat down and worked out, what you're all going to do, how you're going to do it, the business planning process. Oh, well, I don't want you to do that. You don't need to do that with us. I just want you to do this particular bit. And, that's part of our role as well, to be that devil's advocate, is to ask those questions, because we don't mind annoying clients, to be honest with you, if we feel we're kind of adding a value to the development process. While we've got Ian here, does anybody want to ask Ian any questions about, hands go up, right, I'll start here.
One of the biggest things that some of the communities I work in is fuel poverty, and it often leads to arrears. Could people with arrears be part of the scheme?
Simple answer is yes. It's not linked to whether or not they're in debt to the utility company at all. In fact, it should help them with their indebtedness. Because they will definitely consume less electricity. So there's a saving both in in terms of them spending less, but also, you know, they'll benefit from the use of daytime electricity. So we give a pack as well to enable them to, for example, because 50% of the electricity is deemed to be used in the household, and 50% is deemed to be exported based on the kilowatt peak that's on your roof. So you've got typical 12 panels is about 2 kilowatt peak, yeah? But it's deemed that 50% of that is going to the grid. But in reality, if you put your washing machine on, you put your storage radiator on, you have as many cups of tea as you want, you put your computer on, you know, you're using more than that. But just to give an example, I mean, a 2 kilowatt peak array you can virtually keep a kettle boiling all day, you know, with that type of electricity generated.
Okay, you keep the microphone here, because I think the questions are going to be aimed at you. Yes?
I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head in terms of, yes, you need to take time to get the consortium right, but you also need the right structure to be able to act at speed. And I think that, you know, you're very much, you know, correct in the sense of you were timed out almost.
Yeah.
You know, there was a counter counting down even if you weren't aware of it, and bang, the opportunity not missed, but a lot less than it was. But
Yeah.
I think in terms of sort of providing a bit of light there are moves afoot for a community feed-in tariff, which will be at a higher rate. That's part of the consultation process. So that might attract investors back, because obviously then you're offering something better than anyone else can offer. And also the structure you've got can also be used to look at other opportunities outside of solar PV. That there are community groups across Wales looking at hydro, looking at community wind as well. So if you've got the structure and you've got the groups interested in the technology, it's not technology specific necessarily. So there are other opportunities, and are you looking at those at the moment?
Yeah. I agree with you, but for us at the moment it's one war at a time. Yes, there are the renewable heating initiatives as well that we are in fact working with, I think it's British Gas and one of their agents. For every one of our properties that has solar panel arrays, they'll be assessed for wall and cavity insulation as well, and so that would be free to customers as well. So all those added advantages are there. Plus the fact, hydro schemes, you know, it's any sort of a scheme. But I'm prepared to look forward to about this time next year, really, and we'll look at hydro schemes after that.
But you do raise a really interesting point, actually, and it's something that we try to encourage clients is around, okay, well, a lot of the clients that we're getting, the consortia are being stimulated by the need to group together for procurement opportunities. But actually saying, okay, well, if this is your starting point, see it as an infrastructure, see it as a starting platform to think about other things. Because if you're working together to deliver a particular service, for example, or to deliver a particular contract, you're getting to know those individual organisations, the trust is building, and therefore you might be willing to sit down and say, do you know what, I've just had my recent quote now for my kind of my insurance policy. How much are you paying on this? You know, why don't we think about doing this collaboratively and kind of purchasing this jointly on an annual basis? So the discussions and conversations within that network start to grow, and you start to think about other ways then in which you can build the consortia working mechanism, really. Oh gosh, I'm holding a huge fluffy microphone. That's not something I expected to be doing at the end of today. Has anybody got any other questions that they want to pose to Ian? I was thinking particularly about the consortia working side of things, yeah?
More, not so much to Ian, but to yourself possibly. Okay. How many consortia are active in Wales at the moment?
Oh gosh.
And in what sectors? Because I don't know that many. And obviously if there are social enterprises that could join those or could look at those specifically. So is there a database, or going back to what we talked about before with the database of social enterprises, is there a database of consortia?
Well, no, that's an interesting one. There's not, and it's something that perhaps as an organisation we need to be looking far more actively. We obviously have databases of clients that we work with. And I mean, Cooperatives UK do a lot of, database housing in terms of, I suppose, organisations that say they have a cooperative structure, really. I mean, in terms of cooperatives and kind of consortia, particularly across Wales, there are examples, and I'm certainly kind of willing to share kind of case study examples with you. You know, I can kind of link you to our website, and actually that there's one example there that I'm currently working with. But actually, it's quite a, I'm not saying it's an untested model, but it's a relatively new model because the external environmental forces at the moment are forcing organisations to think about this more proactively. So there are some, like your Secure Wales, there are some very kind of well embedded models, but it's something that's quite new actually for organisations to really be looking at. But certainly, you know, in terms of case studies, there's information on all of your chairs of existing consortia that have actually kind of really pushed ahead with this. It's really interesting. The agricultural sector in Wales has really grasped onto the idea of consortia working. As an organisation, quite a number of years ago, we had what was called an agri-food project, working directly with the agricultural sector around joint collaborative initiatives. And there's some really interesting case studies on your sheets there about really large household names now, which you wouldn't know are consortia, but actually are consortia, where actually the farming kind of community decided to say, okay, well, let's externalise our risk from having to have a sole provider contract with one particular supermarket when we could have that contract through the consortia and leave us to our independent things separately. So the agricultural sector, some really, really fantastic examples. Social enterprises, that's what we, you know, this is why I suppose we've got this project, is we recognise there's a development need in the social enterprise sector in Wales to be moving this forward. So as a project, and kind of use our website, we'll keep kind of pumping case studies on there and making this kind of concept seem as real as possible, really.
I think we're looking at consortium development within the voluntary sector. I mean, the largest agri kind of cooperative is ASDA, isn't it? You know, Associated Dairies, and look what they've become. You know, so you do get farm cooperatives, which are producer cooperatives, essentially. I could give you another example. Within the Development Trust Association, there's about 40 organisations belong to the Development Trust Association Wales. And a number of them around the valleys got together and formed a consortium called Build Wales. Now that has, anecdotally this is, that they've experienced very similar problems to what the GSEL consortium are going through. And I'm keen that we don't repeat those mistakes. What didn't occur in Build Wales was that the separate entity was not allowed to form. That each of the separate members of the consortium was still carrying on in their own way, assuming the roles of the consortium. And that's what's happened with GSEL. We've had one set of key personnel doing all the technical work, and others doing the community engagement, others doing bits of legal work, others doing administration work associated with it. In the end, what is supposed to be a cost associated with the consortium is being borne by my organisation principally, but two other organisations have contributed to it as well. And so, you know, that leads to some dislocation in terms of progress and purpose. Having said that, I mean, I think there is a role for organisations to get together to form consortium to protect one another's interests. We've got very close associations with the Avon Valley, for example, and Alison might have heard me say this, about the Avon Valley. We need to be working far more closely with them. We were saying 3 or 4 years ago that they're in danger of running out of their funding base because they're dependent on grants. Whereas if we form together, have residents from the Avon Valley on the board of NSA and residents from Aberavon on the board of their organisation, we've got the basis of an overarching development trust then to cover the whole of the Aberavon constituency. That doesn't mean to say that you close down the respective organisation. It means that you can create an overarching envelope that will protect both organisations.
I'm going to have to step in because, as you can hear, the masses are ready to invade us for the closing session.
You told me to get out.
Thank you everybody for contributing this afternoon, and thank you to Ian as well, who's obviously contributed. So I'll put the fluffy mic down now and hand over to the closing session.